The radiator in apartment 4C had been dying since November. Darius Carter, a black single dad, knew its rhythms the way a sailor knows the sound of a failing engine, the metallic clank at 2 in the morning, the weaves that preceded actual heat by 20 minutes, the long silences that meant nothing warm was coming at all. He had learned to sleep through the clanking. He had not learned to sleep through the cold. He was up before 5, standing in the narrow kitchen in wool socks and a flannel shirt he had worn 3 days running, his dark brown hands resting on the counter as he watched the pilot light on the stove flicker. Outside, Chicago pressed its gray weight against the window. Snow had been falling since midnight. The sidewalks below were buried, the parked cars reduced to white mounds, the street itself a pale corridor between 2 walls of dark buildings. He poured milk into a small saucepan and set it over low heat. 2 slices of bread went into the toaster. The loaf was down to its last 4 slices, the heels included, and he would save those for tomorrow's lunch. He worked carefully without waste. Every movement in this kitchen was deliberate now, a framed photo of a beautiful black family from a warmer summer. Darius, his little girl, and her mother hung slightly crooked on the wall above the table, smiling down on a room that felt much colder these days. Lena appeared in the doorway, wearing her pink fleece pajamas and her grandmother's old cardigan over the top. The sleeves rolled up 4 times to clear her hands. She was 7 years old and had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, warm brown skin, and a halo of tight curls that never quite stayed in the braids he did for school. And she looked at him with the particular seriousness that children develop when they understand something is wrong, but haven't been told what. "Morning, Bug." He poured the warm milk into her cup. "Sit down. It's cold." She climbed onto the kitchen chair and wrapped both hands around the mug. The radiator made that sound again. "I know. Is it broken?" "It's old." He set the toast in front of her and sat across the table. "Eat up. You've got school." She ate quietly for a moment. The radiator, as if on cue, issued a long, metallic groan from the hallway. Lena looked toward the sound and then back at her father. "Are we moving again?" she asked. He held his coffee with both hands. She asked the question the way she might ask about the weather, not fearfully, just wanting to know what to prepare for. She had already moved twice in 3 years. She had developed a practical attitude about it that broke his heart every time. "I don't know yet," he said. "I'm working on it." That was true. He had been working on it since September when the layoff notice arrived from Harrove Industrial, one of 400 names on a list. Nothing personal. Restructuring. Thank you for your service. He had worked maintenance and facilities at Harrove for 6 years. He knew every pipe and circuit in that building. He had been, by any reasonable measure, very good at his job. After the layoff, he found contract work. A week here, 10 days there, patching systems in office buildings and apartment complexes around the loop. It paid, but unpredictably. The eviction notice taped to his door 2 days ago had been specific. $1,600 in back rent, 5 days to pay or vacate. He had $340 in his checking account and a job interview that afternoon. He walked Lena to school in the snow, holding her hand on the ice-slicked sidewalk, and then caught the southbound train towards the loop. He wore his good jacket, charcoal wool, bought 3 years ago for a different kind of life, and carried a folder with his resume inside. The job was facilities coordinator at a mid-size property management firm. He had the experience. He just needed the chance. Sterling Financial Tower occupied the northeast corner of Wacker and Michigan. 42 floors of glass and steel that caught winter light on clear days and disappeared entirely into low cloud on days like this one. Darius was passing it on foot. The interview was 3 blocks north when a black sedan pulled to the curb and the rear door opened. The woman who stepped out moved the way executives move, unhurried, certain of the space she occupied. She wore a charcoal wool coat over a dark suit, her dark hair pulled back precisely. She was already reaching for her phone before her feet touched the sidewalk. A courier held the building door. She went through without breaking stride. What fell from her coat pocket landed without sound in the new snow at the edge of the curb. Darius almost did not see it. a slim leather wallet, dark brown, partially buried in the white. He stopped, looked toward the building entrance. She was already gone. He picked it up. The leather was soft and expensive. Inside, a black platinum card bearing the name V. Sterling, a driver's license, Victoria A. Sterling. The address, a near North Side building he recognized as one of the city's most exclusive residential towers. 2 folded $100 bills behind the cards. Behind those, a folded sheath of cash that he did not count, but that was clearly substantial. 500, perhaps more. And tucked into the back slot, a small square of folded paper. He unfolded it. The handwriting was careful. Hurried block capitals on cream notepaper. The note read, "Do not sign the Northbridge contract. Check clause 9.4. He read it twice. Someone had written this to themselves. Someone who apparently needed to be reminded about something significant enough to commit to paper. He understood the impulse. He kept his own notes on yellow legal pads. Reminders to himself of things too important to trust to memory. He stood on the sidewalk in the falling snow and looked at the wallet in his hands. The cash inside was enough to pay the back rent, enough probably to cover the heating bill and put food in the refrigerator for the rest of the month. He looked at the money. He thought about the eviction notice. He thought about Lena asking whether they were moving again. Then he folded the wallet closed, tucked it inside his jacket, and walked toward the building entrance. The lobby security guard was professionally skeptical. Darius explained that he had found a wallet belonging to a Miss V. Sterling. She had come through just minutes before and that he needed to return it. The guard made a phone call. A second guard arrived. Darius waited in the marble lobby with his folder under his arm and snow melting off his boots. And eventually an elevator opened and a young woman in a gray blazer said Miss Sterling would see him briefly. The 52nd floor was a different atmosphere, hushed, carpeted, the city visible in all directions through floor-to-ceiling glass. As he stepped out of the elevator, he felt that small, familiar awareness of being a black man in a space built for people who almost never looked like him. And he did what he always did with that feeling, acknowledged it, and put his focus on the work in front of him. Darius followed the assistant through a glass corridor past a series of conference rooms. The whole north face of the building was exposed to the lake, which in winter was a gray-white expanse indistinguishable from the sky. Victoria Sterling was standing at her desk when he entered, her back to the door, phone pressed to her ear. She raised one finger without turning. Darius stood near the door and waited. The office was large and deliberately spare. A single-framed architectural drawing on one wall, a glass desk with almost nothing on it, 2 chairs arranged for meetings. She finished the call, set the phone down, and turned to look at him. Up close, she was younger than he had expected, mid-30s, composed in the way of someone who had learned composure as a professional tool. She looked at him with the precise, rapid assessment of someone who spent her days evaluating things quickly and accurately. "You found my wallet," she said. "Outside at the curb. You dropped it getting out of the car." He held it out. She took it, checked it with brief efficiency, cards, cash, the note, and set it on the desk. She looked at him again. "Did you read the note?" He met her eyes. Yes. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite relief, not quite alarm. She studied him for a moment in silence. "You understand that note is about something internal to this company. I understood it was important to you. That's why I brought the wallet back." She was quiet then, with the measured neutrality of someone who had sat across many negotiating tables. "You know what was in that wallet?" "Yes, and you came back anyway." "I have a daughter," Darius said. "She watches what I do." Victoria Sterling looked at him for a long, measuring moment. "Then what do you do for work?" "Facilities and operations. 6 years managing building systems at Harrow Industrial. I was laid off in September." He paused. "I have a job interview in 20 minutes, 3 blocks north. I can leave you my contact information if you want to verify any of that." "What does the interview pay?" $42,000, entry level, I'd take it." She looked out the window at the snow, which was still falling, thick and soft, reducing the city below to a soft white blur. Then she looked back at him. "I can offer you a 1-month trial in operations here," she said. facilities oversight for the building, we have ongoing problems with our systems vendor, and we need someone who understands infrastructure directly, not just the contracts around it. 55,000 annual equivalent. I can advance your first 2 weeks' pay if that would be useful. 2 weeks advance would cover the rent, cover the heating, give him a starting point. That would be useful, he said, keeping his voice steady. You would start at the bottom of the building, not the top. Sub-level operations. You would report to Operations Director Neil Pewitt. Are you clear on that? I'm clear. 1 month, she said. After that, we reassess. Neil Pewitt was a compact, practical man of 50 who had been running Sterling's building operations for 11 years without drama or particular recognition, which he seemed to prefer. He gave Darius a brief tour, service corridors, utility rooms, the mechanical sublevel that ran beneath the building's main footprint, and handed him a laminated building map, a security badge, and a ring of physical keys that supplemented the electronic access system. Systems here are layered, Pewitt said, moving through the corridor with the easy familiarity of someone who had walked it thousands of times. New digital control on top, old mechanical on the bottom. The legacy systems haven't been decommissioned because the digital layer depends on them for certain baseline functions. The engineers from the last upgrade didn't fully understand what they were replacing. So we run both. Darius understood this immediately and completely. It was the same at Harif. New systems stacked imperfectly on old ones, the whole arrangement functioning through a combination of technology and institutional memory that lived in the heads of the people who had worked there long enough. He started on the 4th day by tracing the server room HVAC circuit on the 31st floor, which had been running warm, an open complaint from the IT team that had gone unresolved for 2 weeks. The issue turned out to be a legacy damper valve that the digital control system believed was fully open but was not. He found it, cleaned the actuator mechanism, recalibrated. Pyatt looked at the temperature readout afterward and nodded once, which was the highest form of approval he seemed to offer. On the 8th day, working late to complete a ventilation system audit, Darius was in sub-level 5, the deepest accessible level housing the building's oldest mechanical equipment, when he noticed something unusual. In the corner of the room, behind a bank of decommissioned circuit panels, sat a rack of equipment that was not decommissioned, a legacy access logging system, its small green status light blinking steadily in the dark. The kind of system installed in the 1990s that no one had bothered to disable because no one had bothered to check. He almost noted it in his report and moved on. Instead, he sat down in front of it and looked at it for a long moment. Then he noticed something else. The camera mounted near the ceiling, an old analog unit, not integrated with the building's current IP camera network, had a small recording light that was also blinking green. Also running. Also most likely not reviewed in years. He logged both items in his daily operations report to prove it. No particular emphasis, just thorough documentation, the kind any competent facilities review would produce. On the 12th day, he noticed that Mark Dalton, who ran the technical infrastructure team, a tall, quiet man who said little in the weekly operations meetings, had badged into the 48th floor 3 times in the past 7 days. The 48th floor housed the CFO's suite and the financial controls division. Dalton had no IT service tickets logged for that floor. Darius had access to the badge system records as part of his ongoing security audit work for Pewitt. He noted the discrepancy, filed it in his working log, said nothing to anyone. He told himself it was not his business. He was there for a month on a trial basis to maintain the building's infrastructure. He was not there to investigate the people inside it. He told himself this for 4 days until the morning the security team came to his workstation and informed him that his access had been suspended pending a formal investigation. The HR conference room on the 31st floor had the same careful, expensive quality as the rest of the building, but with a different temperature, the kind that comes not from the HVAC system, but from the people in the room. 2 attorneys from the company's legal department, a woman named Deborah Walsh from Human Resources, all of them carrying the particular blankness of people delivering prepared information to someone they did not know. A financial irregularity had been identified, Walsh explained. Approximately $900,000 had moved through a series of maintenance invoices, winter systems upgrades, HVAC work, server infrastructure services over the previous 8 weeks. The invoices were fraudulent. The access credentials used to authorize several of them had been associated on one specific occasion with Darius's badge. The central security camera system shows your badge used to access the server infrastructure room at 1:12 in the morning 2 weeks ago, one of the attorneys said. That access correlates with the final authorization entry on the fraudulent invoice chain. Darius sat with his dark brown hands flat on the table. He had been in that building at 1:12 in the morning 2 weeks ago, finishing the ventilation audit, which had run long. He had been in sub-level 5. He had not been on the 31st floor. I wasn't in the server room that night, he said. I was in sub-level 5. The legacy log system down there would show my badge activity for the evening. The badge record from the primary system contradicts that. Then someone used a clone badge. He said it without accusation, just as the logical conclusion from the evidence. Someone duplicated the badge number, but not the underlying hardware identifier. The legacy system reads both. The attorneys exchanged a glance. Walsh told him that his badge and building access were suspended effective immediately, that he should surrender his keycard, and that he was placed on administrative leave pending review. Not terminated, not yet. He surrendered the badge. He rode the elevator down alone. In the lobby, he put on his coat and walked through the revolving door into the cold. The snow had stopped during the day. It lay in hard ridges along the curbs and in white caps on the decorative trees lining the plaza. He noticed the black sedan parked across the street because it was idling in a no-standing zone. Unusual. He did not look at it directly. He walked to the train. That evening, Lena was helping him stack dishes after dinner when she said with no particular emphasis, "A man talked to me outside school today, near the gate." Darius set down the bowl he was holding. He turned to look at her with the careful, level calm he used when he needed her to keep talking without becoming frightened. "What did he say, Bug?" he asked. "What time you usually get home? I didn't tell him." She looked up at him. "Was that right?" "That was exactly right." He crouched down to her level. "Did you see what he looked like?" "He had a gray coat. I didn't like the way he talked, like he was pretending to be friendly." Darius held her shoulders gently. He kept his face still while his mind moved through several calculations at once. "You did the right thing. If anyone talks to you like that again, you walk directly to a teacher. Can you do that?" She nodded, solemn and certain. He held her for a moment, longer than was necessary. He waited until Lena was asleep before he called Victoria Sterling's direct line. He had not expected her to answer at 9:30 on a weeknight. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Carter?" She didn't sound surprised to hear from him. "Someone approached my daughter outside her school today," he said, "asking when I come home." Silence on the line. Then, "Tell me everything you have observed since you started working here. Take your time." He told her about the badge access discrepancy on the 31st floor server room, a different hardware identifier in the legacy log. He told her about Mark Dalton's unexplained visits to the 48th floor. He told her about the legacy log system in sub-level 5, still running, still recording 27 years of data. He told her about the analog camera in the same room. He gave her dates, floor numbers, badge event times where he had them. He kept his voice even and his account specific. He was not speculating. He was describing what he had observed and documented. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "The Northbridge contract," she said. "The note in my wallet. Someone on the inside needed me to sign that contract before I reviewed it carefully. Clause 9.4 establishes a vendor payment escrow routed through a subsidiary holding company that our legal team did not flag during initial review because it was buried in a definitional appendix. If I had signed, the fraudulent invoices would have been legitimized retroactively through the escrow mechanism." "Who wrote the note?" Darius asked. "I did," she said. "To myself that morning. I had found the clause the night before during a late review, and I wrote the reminder before I left the office. Then I forgot the note in my coat." A pause. The legacy log system. You said it was still active when you found it 2 weeks ago. Green light running. Then we need to get into that sub-level tonight, she said. I'll meet you at the service entrance at 11 o'clock. She was there before him, which he had not expected. She was wearing a dark coat and flat boots, and she held a key card that apparently retained emergency override access to the service entrance independent of the standard badge suspension protocol. CEO protocols, she said simply. For situations requiring movement through the building without a standard access trail. The service corridors were dim and cold, the heating reduced to minimum in the building's non-operational zones after hours. Their footsteps were quiet on the concrete. He led and she followed without comment through the sub-level passages, navigating from memory. Sub-level 5 was colder than the floors above. The legacy log system sat where he had last seen it, its green light steady and patient in the dark. He sat down at the terminal. The interface was archaic, text-based, keyboard-controlled, the kind of system that had been standard in the mid-1990s. But he worked through it methodically, the way he worked through any unfamiliar system. The equipment had been logging badge access events continuously since its installation. 27 years of data stored locally on a drive that had somehow never failed. He navigated to the records from the past 60 days. There, Victoria said, leaning over his shoulder. The log showed a badge access event for the 31st floor server room at 1:12 in the morning on the relevant date. The badge number matched Darius's, but the hardware serial identifier, the deeper layer the legacy system recorded, was different from his badge's actual serial. Clone, he said. They duplicated the badge number, which is what the new system reads, but they couldn't duplicate the hardware identifier because that's embedded in the physical chip. The legacy system reads both. The mismatch is the proof. He navigated next to the analog camera archive. The footage was grainy and time-stamped in the lower corner in small white numerals. He scrolled forward to 1:09 in the morning on the relevant night. A figure appeared in the corridor outside the server room, tall, moving with the deliberate, unhurried efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this. The camera angle was not ideal, but as the figure turned to badge through the server room door, his face came briefly into the light from the corridor panel. Clear enough. Mark Dalton, Victoria said. She straightened slowly. Her voice was controlled and precise. Can you transfer those records? He had a USB drive in his jacket pocket. Old habit from years of field work, always carry your own tools. He copied the log data and the relevant footage segments. 5 minutes of careful work in a cold room beneath the Chicago winter. They left the way they had come in, back through the service corridor, back into the snow. She called an emergency board session for 7 the following morning. Darius arrived with the USB drive and sat in a chair along the wall of the 52nd floor conference room while Victoria presented the evidence to 8 board members and the company's general counsel. He was aware, briefly, of how much his deep brown skin stood out among the gray suits and pale faces at the table, and then, as always, he let the awareness go and watched the facts do their work. She presented it without drama the way she likely presented everything, methodically in sequence, building the logical structure before revealing the conclusion. First, the Northbridge contract, clause 9.4 specifically, the payment routing architecture buried in the definitional appendix, the way it would have legitimized the prior fraudulent invoices if executed. Then the invoice chain itself, $900,000 in fraudulent maintenance billing across 8 weeks. Each invoice processed through a systems access layer that required elevated infrastructure credentials. Then the evidence from the sublevel, the hardware identifier mismatch, the analog footage. Richard Holston sat to the far end of the table. He was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s who had been at Sterling Financial for 15 years and had in that time built the kind of credibility that comes from long service without obvious failure. Darius watched him through the presentation. He did not look at the screen. He looked at the table in front of him with the careful blankness of someone managing their face. When the footage ran, Mark Dalton's figure in the corridor turning towards Yama at the light, Holston's expression moved through several rapid changes that ended in stillness. The invoice chain traces to a subsidiary account established through a Nevada LLC 3 years ago, Victoria said. The vendor passed initial compliance screening. It has no operational history beyond these transactions. The payment pattern, multiple tranches below the automatic review threshold, indicates deliberate design. This was not opportunistic. Someone spent considerable time constructing this. She paused. Richard, she said, his first name for the first time. The Nevada LLC's principal officer of record shares your home address. The room held a complete, clean silence. The snow outside pressed close and gray against the glass. Holston said nothing for a long moment. The general counsel was very still. Then Holston said in a flat and careful voice, "I want to speak with my attorney." Someone closed a laptop. 2 board members exchanged a brief glance. The meeting ended in the way that such meetings end, not with resolution, but with the mechanical beginning of resolution. Holston was escorted from the building by security 40 minutes later. Mark Dalton did not come in that morning. By 4 in the afternoon, he had been formally terminated. The company's general counsel had initiated contact with federal financial investigators. The Northbridge contract was voided before noon. Darius sat in his chair along the wall through all of it. He had not been asked to speak. He did not need to. The log data and the footage and the clause in the contract were doing that work themselves, which was as it should be. Neil Pussett appeared in the sub-level operations office mid-morning with 2 cups of coffee and the comfortable directness of a man who did not see much point in avoiding what needed to be said. "Hell of a first month," Puett said. "Not what I expected. You found the legacy log system in your first week. I have walked through that room more times than I can count. I stopped seeing the equipment years ago. The badge anomaly. You flagged it in your daily report on day 12. I read that report. I didn't act on it. You had no particular reason to. I had the same information you did." He said it without self-pity, just as a factual accounting of the situation. "That's worth something to me going forward." They sat in the quiet of the operations office for a moment. The building's heating system ran steady and warm around them. Victoria Sterling came to the office at 2 in the afternoon. She came alone, no assistant, no legal team. She sat in the chair across from Darius, set a document folder on the desk, and looked at him directly. "Your trial period ends in 8 days, she said. "I would like to convert it to a permanent position. The title is Director of Operations and Infrastructure. The role would oversee all facilities management, building systems, and physical security infrastructure for this property and 2 additional properties we manage in the loop." Neil has agreed to move into a senior advisory capacity, which is, as he will tell you, what he has wanted for several years. Puett from the corner made a sound of mild confirmation. She named a salary figure. It was more than Darius had earned in any single year at Harrove, more than he had thought was realistic to reach for another decade. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "This offer is not a reward for returning the wallet. It is not gratitude for what you found in sub-level 5. It is based on what I observed in 12 working days. A legacy HVAC fault diagnosed and resolved when our vendor had it open for 2 weeks. A badge system audit thorough enough to catch an anomaly our own security team had missed. Documentation detailed and accurate enough to hold up in a board presentation and, shortly, in a federal investigation." She paused. "And the composure to be falsely accused of theft and walk back into this building the same night to do the right thing again. That is the job. That is why I am offering it." Darius looked at the folder. He looked at her. "I'll take it," he said. She nodded, stood, extended her hand across the desk. He shook it, his dark brown fingers closing around hers. She left. Puett waited a beat and then picked up his coffee. "She doesn't waste words," he said. "No," Darius agreed. "Good quality in a boss." "Agreed." He was home by 5:30, which was early enough to pick Lena up from the after-school program himself for the first time in 3 weeks. She ran to him across the gymnasium floor, and he caught her and held her with her feet off the ground for a moment, her small weight solid and warm against him, her tight curls brushing his cheek. They walked home through the early dark together, their boots crunching in the old snow. The streetlights were already on, casting orange pools on the white sidewalk. The city around them was its familiar winter self, exhaust and cold air and the distant sound of traffic, but something had changed in the quality of it, or in him, or both. He made dinner, pasta with butter and parmesan, her standard request, with a salad because he always insisted on the salad, regardless of what she thought about it. They ate at the kitchen table with the radiator providing its usual metallic commentary from the hallway. He was going to get that radiator properly serviced, he thought. You seem different, Lena said. How so? She considered this with the gravity she brought to most questions worth asking. Less worried, like when you figured out the leak under the sink. He poured her more milk. I got the job, the permanent one, the tall building. Yes, she nodded, processing this. Did you win? He thought about the board meeting and Holston's face going still and the clean mechanical sound of a door closing on something that had been wrong for a long time. He thought about the legacy log system blinking its patient green light in the dark for 27 years, recording faithfully, waiting for the moment when someone would need what it had kept. He thought about a wallet in the snow and a girl who watched what her father did. I did the right thing, he said, a few times when it would have been easier not to, and it worked out. Lena considered this carefully. Outside, snow was falling again, a steady, soft accumulation pressing the winter close around the building. Is that what winning is? She asked. I think so, he said. I think that might be exactly what it is. She seemed satisfied. She went back to her pasta. He watched her eat, and the radiator clanked its familiar note, and the snow fell outside the window. And in the small, warm room, he thought that the hardest thing about integrity is not the obvious moments, not the wallet on the sidewalk with no one watching. It is the moments after that, when the cost has become real and the outcome is uncertain and you keep going anyway, not because you know it will work out, because your daughter is watching, even when she isn't in the room, especially then. Epilogue. 3 weeks later, Neil Pewitt stopped by the Director of Operations office, Darius's office now, down the hall from Pewitt's own with a small item he thought Darius might want. The legacy log system's local hard drive had been recovered by the IT forensics team during their evidence collection. The federal investigators had extracted what they needed. The remaining data had been cleared for return. Pewitt had asked the IT team to preserve the drive rather than dispose of it. Darius set it on the shelf above his desk between his building maps and his field notebook. It was not a sentimental gesture exactly. It was more that he found value in accurate records, in the evidence that some systems, if they are built well and left alone and not interfered with, will keep doing their job faithfully for decades, recording what they see, waiting without complaint for the moment when someone finally needs them. He thought that was a principle worth keeping visible, worth remembering in the work ahead.